All right, I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation. In my district, we are looking at revamping our literacy model. We've had the same literacy model with different areas of focus as well as suggested instructional minutes and strategies for about 10 years. And in my district, our literacy scores, specifically our DIBEL scores, have kind of flatlined for the past 3 or 4 years. And so we're um, have put together a committee that is looking at, is it the components of the model that need to be reworked? Is it, teacher, um, how teachers follow through with the suggested model? Or do we need a whole new kind of guideline and focus? So I'm a member of a small committee of teachers, district personnel, and administrators that is studying the different focuses of literacy. We're looking at small group instruction, writing. I'm a part of the fluency. We're looking at comprehension as well as phonics instruction. And we did research, looked at current research, what that said about literacy and best practices for literacy. We also looked at some of the highest performing schools in the state that had similar demographics as our own, and to see what those schools and those teachers were doing. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My focus was fluency, and fluency truly is the gateway to comprehension, which is the most important part about reading, about literacy. I think we've all been somewhere. For me, it's church. We've all been somewhere where there has been an adult that's reading, and you just want to say, "Oh my goodness, just let me read the text," or you're diagnosing. If you were in my class, this is the intervention that I would put you in. I don't know. Maybe I'm just rude like that, but I do that unintentionally, but I do. So I think fluency is really an important part of a child's literacy and something that we do need to focus on. I think we do focus on it a lot when kids are younger, in lower grades, K2, and even in third grade. And sometimes I think when they get up into the upper grades in fourth and fifth, sometimes the explicit instruction of fluency kind of goes by the wayside. So let's take a look and see what are some of the important aspects of fluency that we need to consider. The first thing that I want to talk about is just what is fluency. I think for a lot of years, teachers and students and parents thought of fluency as just speed. How fast can kids read? And I'm really grateful that we've kind of gone away from just the speed aspect and moved into a lot more areas of fluency. Fluency is the automatic and quick, and I like the word instantaneous recognition of words, as well as their prosody, or how expressively they read. So pitch, how they phrase, how they put their reading in and their words into phrases, which parts of words that they stress. All of those are really important parts of a fluent reader, and that came from Rutgers University. Fluency is really important, but why is it important? One of the main reasons that it's important is because it is a gateway to comprehension. Fluency provides that bridge between recognizing words and understanding what the text is saying, that learning to read versus reading to learn. And it's important because the more fluent students are, the less brain power and focus they have to use on decoding words, and they can really focus on what they're trying to read. And I think the enjoyment of reading, which is where we hope to get kids anyway. I pulled up the suggested literacy model, Utah State Office of Education website. And in kindergarten, some of the suggested focuses were adult demonstration daily. In first grade, kids should be participating in daily repeated oral reading of familiar text. Same thing with second grade, they should be receiving corrective feedback. And in 3rd through 6th grade, students should have daily practice reading out loud with corrective feedback. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is there wasn't any suggested minutes on the state model. One of the things that we have been discussing on our current district model is that it says 30 minutes of fluency daily. And we'll get into this a little bit, but you know, in talking to teachers, there are very few teachers that say, okay, here's our 30-minute fluency block, and they are just focusing on fluency. They're trying to provide a more comprehensive approach and line out a more comprehensive program. In looking at our Utah State Core Standards for Fluency in kindergarten, students should be reading emergent reader texts with purpose and understanding. And in 1st through 5th grade, the focus really comes into play in students being able to read with accuracy and fluency to support their comprehension. The comprehension is the important part. And they should also be able to, within their fluency, use context clues and things to provide themselves with appropriate word recognition and vocabulary understanding. All right, let's get on to some of the best practices on how to teach fluency. I think there's kind of a wide spread of things that are going on and that are happening with fluency and what teachers are doing. Some teachers are really hitting the timings a lot, and that's their whole fluency instruction. And some teachers are doing very little fluency instruction. So some of the best practices, one of the best practices is modeling reading. And one of those best practices is reading out loud. And I remember as a 5th grader, that was one of my very favorite things about 5th grade is having my teacher read out loud to us. But I think it has to look a little bit different than the teacher sitting in the rocking chair, the kids sitting around her on the rug, and listening to a story. In order for this type of practice to really improve student reading, the teacher needs to read out loud and model what a good fluent reader sounds like. But the teacher also needs to engage students in the text. It's not just you read, I listen, I enjoy. Teachers should be demonstrating appropriate pace and phrasing and expression, and I think this is a great time for a teacher to kind of demonstrate what they are thinking to themselves. When a good reader, and especially a reader who enjoys reading, is participating and actively engaged in their book, they are thinking and asking questions and wondering, and I think that's a great time for the teacher to do that with her students. One of the important things is that students should have a copy of the text and they should follow along in order to help them be engaged, and also to make that connection with the vocabulary, with the phonics, with the phrasing, so that they're not only hearing a good reader, but they're seeing what the text is saying and making that connection within their own minds. I think we have to be careful when we say, okay, teachers, read aloud is a great way to improve fluency, because I know teachers who will do just what I said earlier, sit their students on the rug, sit them on the chair, and they will just read. One of the most important and one of the most effective ways to improve students' reading is by repeated reading. The National Reading Panel says that repeated oral reading is one of the most documented approaches to improving fluency. And the more students read a text, their familiar vocabulary, the vocabulary becomes familiar, and it goes from that kind of unfamiliar into their working word base. It also increases their depth of knowledge. I know in my district we're really looking at depth of knowledge, and repeated reading increases a student's depth of knowledge because they're not focusing like they are the first time around, focusing on the text. They're able to focus on what can I learn from this? What is the text telling me? What connections can I make? So repeated reading is a wonderful one, and one that I know a lot of teachers practice. The next one was wide reading, and I'd never heard of wide reading before, so I did some research, and this is just your silent sustained reading or your dear time or your, whatever you want to call it. The National Reading Panel did say that encouraging students to read is great, and students need to read a lot more than they are in order to become fluent readers. One of the things that the National Reading Panel said is because we can't look into kids' brains and see what they're thinking and see, if they're following the text and listen to how they're reading to themselves in their brain, we can't really determine the amount of growth that is that is received by that silent sustained reading. The next one was coached or assisted reading, and this is your close reading that we've all been learning about, since the beginning of our new core. The important thing is that it's on a student level, and we're providing that corrective feedback. The more times we read something and we receive that corrective feedback, it will help ensure that kids are not making those same errors. I thought it was interesting that there is a limit, though, the number of times that is beneficial for kids to reread a text, and anywhere from 3 to 5 times is optimal. Much past 5 times, it isn't really doing students much good to reread the text. And the research did say that students that participate in that assisted reading with coached feedback, they made significant gains and improvements over the other students and their peers. And comprehension was improved with second language learners, as you can imagine. When we're reading a text more than once, they have access to, most importantly, that vocabulary. The next thing that I read about and that I studied as a great practice was chunking of text. And I wasn't sure exactly what that meant either, but it just means that students are reading a smaller amount of text. Instead of having students read and reread and reread that 3 to 5 times a whole chapter of a text, we're having them read a paragraph or two. A lot of our resources and materials that we have access to nowadays, that a lot of us, I'm sure, are using, such as Read Naturally, Time for Kids, Scholastic magazines, Utah Studies Weekly magazines, readworks.org. A lot of these are smaller, shorter chunked texts already, so kids are being able to focus on the content of a smaller amount of text, and then they can focus on those words for a longer period of time. One of the last practices that I researched was just words in isolation. Words and phrases, high frequency lists, fry phrases, sight words, Xeno sight words, and text specific vocabulary, focusing on some of those specific words that occur in high frequency in a text. All right, and lastly, when I gave this with my school, one of the things that we did was we used our Dibbles report to determine students' needs and to kind of set some specific goals. So one of the things that you can do yourself or with your teachers is pull up your favorite Dibbles report that shows student proficiency. We looked specifically at speed and accuracy. And then I placed the students in 4 categories. I had a category of students that were proficient in speed and accuracy. I make a category for students that are proficient in speed but not in accuracy, proficient in accuracy but not in speed, and proficient in neither speed nor accuracy. And then by using those categories, you can help develop some groups and some specific interventions that can focus on the areas of concern, if there are any, or if we're looking at those students that are proficient in accuracy and speed, we can develop some learning goals and some targets to kind of push those students. Finally, there's very strong research that indicates that while fluency in and of itself is not sufficient to ensure high levels of reading achievement and comprehension, fluency is absolutely necessary for that achievement and for comprehension. And I'm a strong believer in getting students to enjoy reading for the love of reading. And I think if we're going to do that, one of the things we have to focus on is helping them to become fluent readers so that they can get past the laborious part of reading and into the enjoyment. Thank you.